Hello, friends. First, this evening, I'd like to, this afternoon, I'm sorry, somewhere in this global time frame, I'd like to acknowledge our collective suffering present over these past few years and more. The pandemic, uh, the very real threat that climate change poses to our planet and to our descendants, increasing societal injustices and turmoil politically in the West, and the insanity of war to our east. There's lots of distractions inviting us to turn away from things as they are, harder and harder to accept as real. Maybe hard to practice at this time, at this moment. Find a comfortable position, close your eyes or leave them open in a general downward gaze. Take a deep breath in and out, and another breath in and out. Take one more breath and let go of all the tension, excitement, and busyness of the day. Relax your forehead, jaw, neck, and shoulders. Find an anchor, maybe your breath or the sounds around you. Stay with your anchor, allowing thoughts and feelings to come and go like waves on the ocean. Be aware of your thoughts and feelings without judging them, returning to your anchor when they pass through your awareness. Continue to focus on your breath or sounds around you for a few more minutes. When you're pulled away by thoughts, feelings, or body sensations, recognize them without judgment and allow them to be. Then return to your anchor and to the present moment. um, Before I begin the teaching, I wanted to loop back to a question about our relationship to thoughts that a prior student, Ed, asked. One that I think some of you had in mind or on the tip of your tongue, one that I answered poorly the first time. Ed said, if we're not our thoughts, then what are we? So uh, I imagine Ed is well known for asking the elephant in the room difficult questions. So what I did wrong was to hear the question from my conditioned mind, my filtered mind. I failed to answer the best way possible for a question with potentially as many possible answers as there are those of us that ponder it. And to answer it from my own life experience of the universe, with my personal answer at that moment, that increasingly satisfies the question, who and what am I? So this from Alan Watts. Through our eyes, the universe is perceiving itself. Through our ears, the universe is listening to its harmonies. We are the witnesses through which the universe becomes conscious of its glory, of its magnificence. And Eckhart Tolle said, you are not in the universe, you are the universe, an intrinsic part of it. Ultimately, you're not a person, but a focal point where the universe is becoming conscious of itself. What an amazing miracle. So I'll be as concise as I can be to answer that question. I believe that I am a product and reflection of a universe that is characterized by impermanence, interconnectedness, and interdependentness. I'm a sentient being existing in the relationship between me and all beings and phenomena. Like all beings and things, I rise spiritually and energetically from the universal soup, very briefly. And as a result of the independent aliveness of absolutely everything else, all the causes and conditions on the grandest of scales have led to me. Now, my yogi likes to say that matter is energy cooled down. Wisdom suggests that the actual nature of sentient beings, our true essence, is hidden from us by the limitations of our senses and obscured by clouds of delusion formed in large part by our conditioned responses to that which rises in our experience. In a Zoom talk a few months ago, author, mindfulness teacher, lawyer, and racial justice leader Rhonda McGee said that we are all one family who've forgotten who we are. For me, that's why the present moment is a sacred space. Mindfulness practice in daily life is how I get to live in that space and occasionally, joyfully, enjoy a glimpse of what is primordial and actual. My answer. In this session, entitled The Wise Heart, we begin to explore what's often called heartfulness. In the insight meditation tradition, typically there are 4 domains of heart practice that coincide with what Buddhism calls the 4 immeasurables. You may also hear them referred to as the 4 divine abodes or 4 Brahma Viharas. They are a series of 4 virtues or sublime and noble attitudes toward all beings. They're often listed as loving kindness, or in Sanskrit, metta, compassion, or karuna, joy, or mudita, more accurately perhaps translated as sympathetic joy, and equanimity, or upekkha. I'll talk briefly about loving kindness, compassion, and equanimity, and lead us in a practice that spans these 3. The discussion of joy is seriously meant for a fuller future session. I'll talk a little out of order by starting with compassion. In the insight tradition and its spin-offs, mindfulness is increasingly becoming synonymous with compassion, for reasons you will understand with further study if you are so inclined. But in this moment, I wanted to begin with the Pali word, bodhicitta, a complex and layered concept that signals the awakening of the heart-mind, the intention to awaken to life in order to help others to awaken to life. And compassion is a stepping stone into bodhicitta. The Dalai Lama, when he was in DC, about a decade ago, I guess, he said, "I don't know why people like me so much." And then he said, "Well, it must be because I care about bodhicitta. I can't claim to practice all the time, but I care about it." And I loved the way he put that the important thing is that we care about caring. We know our hearts aren't always wide open and tender. We're often caught in all sorts of more small-minded places, right? But something in us cares about caring. And we value it because in the moments that we're caring, we probably feel most at home with who we sense we really are. We feel most at home in ourselves and also most at home and connected with others. A story I love that one of my teachers tells about this woman who describes how this old, tired-looking dog, well-fed with a collar but no tags, comes into her yard, then walks into her house, down the hall, into the living room, lies down on the couch, and falls asleep. And she says she doesn't mind. He seems like a nice dog. Her dogs don't mind. So she let the dog nap. And an hour later, he gets up. She lets him out. Fine. Next day, he comes back. And the same thing happens. He walks into the living room, comes onto the couch, lies down, sleeps for an hour, and leaves. Well, when it happened the third day, she put a note on his collar to take home. And it said, every afternoon, your dog comes into my house for a nap. Excuse me. I don't mind, but I want to make sure it's okay with you. So next day he arrives again. Different note pinned to his collar. He lives in a home with 3 children. He's trying to catch up on his sleep. Mind if I come along next time? So there's a sense that we love when there's this belonging and shared understanding of what it's like to be on this planet in these bodies. Compassion literally means to suffer together. It's the feeling that arises when we encounter suffering and we feel motivation to relieve it. Now, empathy, it's a precursor, refers to our ability to take the perspective of another, to feel the emotions another is experiencing. It morphs into compassion when that experience includes the desire to help. Now, altruism is selfless behavior, and it's often prompted by compassion, but not always. These might be some distinctions that are useful. And then mindfulness is that non-judging awareness that's always there to some degree. And when it's there more and more fully, it gives rise to compassion. It's that noticing and sensitivity that invites us to feel the sense of what another's feeling and care and want to respond. Over these last years, research is emerging about a biological basis of compassion. It's revealed as a key adaptive strategy in our human evolution, in that it enables us to rise above self-interest and really sense a belonging to the whole net of life. So waking up in an evolutionary sense is a real game changer. And in our bodies, when we feel good, it's often an evolutionary strategy to prompt us to continue in a certain direction. And the arising of compassion feels good. When we act out of compassion, it feels good. The areas of the prefrontal cortex that correspond to interpersonal relations fire up, and oxytocin, the bonding hormone, flows. The pleasure center lights up. But we're being encouraged by evolution to keep evolving in the direction of compassion. And compassion can be cultivated through practice. We could pay attention in ways that cultivate it. And then in a deep way, it leads to a shift in felt identity from that separateness to belonging to the web of life. As the Dalai Lama put it, compassion is the seed of inner peace, and we all have the same potential. In you lies the hope for creating a better future for the world. Excuse me. And just as the evolutionary direction is to evolve compassion, there are pulls from our evolutionary past that create blocks that prevent easy access to the experience of compassion. For example, unmet needs for safety, satisfaction, for feeling connected. If there are unmet needs, we can regress. It's said that we can get hijacked by the limbic system, the part of the brain involved in our behavioral and emotional responses, behaviors we need for survival. feeding, reproduction, caring for our young, and fight or flight responses. One of Einstein's famous quotes refers to an optical delusion of separateness from others that restricts our affections. When we are in limbic hijack, our separateness is reinforced to the extent that people around us become unreal others. The unreal other, then, is an object that can bring us more pleasure and satisfaction, recognition, give us something, or one that's going to cause us suffering. It's dangerous and demanding. Or the other isn't so relevant, in which case we barely pay attention at all. There's a story of a man sitting at home, and he hears a knock on his door. He opens the door and he sees a snail on the porch. So he picks up the snail and he throws it as far as he can see. 3 years later, there's a knock on a door. He opens it. It's the same snail. And the snail says, "What the heck was that all about?" There's a sense, again, with unreal other that either we're going to push it away because it's a threat, or we're going to grasp onto it because it's giving us something, or we just don't pay attention. There's a story I love about a Sikh master who gives his two most devoted disciples each a chicken. And he says, "Go to where no one can see and kill the chicken." And so one goes behind the shed and chops off the chicken's head with an axe. And the other wanders around for hours and returns with the chicken alive. And the master said, well, what happened? And the response from the guy with the live chicken was, "Well, I can't find a place to kill the chicken where no one can see me. Everywhere I go, the chicken sees." So really, the cultivation of compassion is cultivating a sense of the realness of each other. And when we look, we're able to wake up out of all of the projections and stories originating from our limbic, threatened, or craving brain and sense who's there. And when we witness this in our personal lives, we shouldn't condemn the fact that we get caught in this trance of the unreal other, but we get to notice when we're stressed what happens in our relationships. Mindfulness. I can notice in myself when I'm busy and I have an agenda and there's anxiety about getting things done. And I'm really caught in that mindset of busy person who has to accomplish this and this and this. And then I find myself in contact with someone who's having a hard time. So I can sound really compassionate. And inside, it's like some part of me is going through the motions. And I'm just not all there. And I know that, and I don't feel good about it. And so what we start noticing is not only that we're cut off, but we don't get rewards from the evolutionary pleasure centers that we get when we're aligned with others, with ourselves, and with our missions. We don't feel good. It happens when we're grasping after something, and it happens when we're avoiding. One of the classic research studies that you may be familiar with is the Good Samaritan study that was done at Princeton, where the seminarians were given a practice sermon. And half of them were assigned the story of the Good Samaritan. The other half, a random Bible story. And then they're supposed to go to another building and give the sermon and be evaluated. But on the way to the other building, they pass a person in the doorway who's moaning, in distress. So the big question is, do they stop and help? And it seems that was determined by how much time they thought they had before giving their sermon. And if they believed they'd be late, they didn't stop to help. And this was true even if they're on their way to give a sermon about the Good Samaritan. And I just think that's one of the most brilliant and revealing pieces of research, because when we care about caring, but when we're in the grip of there's not enough time, I mean, how many of you know that feeling, right? There's not enough time. Okay. It's one of the most heinous filters or beliefs that we live with, that there's not enough time. And it can lead to knowing that something terrible is sure to go wrong very soon. We live with it in so many of our moments. We don't even experience how much others become unreal. It's like when you're in crazy traffic. You know how everyone else is traffic? It's not you. You're not the traffic, are you? And I want to note that for the last 2 or 3 decades, there's been this large field of contemplative psychology and contemplative neuroscience that's been studying mindfulness. As you may know, over 5,000 peer-reviewed papers and empirical studies. And the field is shifting now, and I'm glad about that as a student of this area. The research, excuse me, is leaning more into compassion and self-compassion. So we're also talking about something that the culture needs. And then it's now being mirrored in the research. Even Darwin. If you read closely in Darwin, yes, there is this kind of survival of the fittest part. But much of Darwin's writing also talks about cooperation and care between members of species. And he uses the word compassion. He talks about all beings. It's kind of an extraordinary thing. And part of Darwin got shortchanged in our education, but it's there in the science as well as in the heart of human culture. When love meets pain in the four divine abodes, or what are also called the four capacities of the awakened heart, of love, compassion, joy, and equanimity that we've been talking about, when love meets pain, it turns to compassion. It's a different state, as you know. It's not just, may you be happy, but it's that shared quivering of the heart that says, oh, yes, this is the tenderness that we share in our humanity. So this from Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. When you awaken your heart, you find to your surprise that your heart is empty. You find that you're looking into space. Who are you? Where are you? What is your heart? If you really look, you don't find anything tangible and solid. If you search for the awakened heart, if you put your hand through your rib cage and feel for it, there's nothing there but tenderness. You feel sore and soft. And if you don't open your eyes to the rest of the world, you feel tremendous sadness. The sadness doesn't come from being mistreated. You don't feel sad because someone has insulted you or because you feel impoverished. Rather, this experience of sadness is unconditional. It occurs because your heart is completely open and exposed like pure raw meat. And he writes, even if a mosquito lands on you, you feel so touched. And yet, it is this tender heart of the warrior that has the power to heal the world. That tenderness grows. And the knowing that you can do this, that this is possible. And not only is it possible, but there's a beauty to it, and there's a dignity and a nobility, that this is a capacity that was born in you. And as Thich Nhat Hanh said, since I was a young man, I've tried to understand the nature of compassion. But what little compassion I've learned has not come from that form of understanding, but simply from my actual experience of suffering. So it's not that it's something wrong with life, it's part of who we are. I think about the biblical story of Job and the poetic answer from the voice from the whirlwind when Job was saying, why did this happen? How could there be so much suffering? And how could so much happen to me? And the voice says, where were you when I clothed the sky? And when I placed the sun in their orbits? Were you there when I laid the foundation of the earth? When I set the morning stars to sing together in the sky? When I set the sea with doors to hold it as it gushed forth out of the womb of darkness? When I swaddled the earth in clouds? Do you know the seasons of the wild ass as she brings forth her young, and the day the falcons learn to fly? Who are you to ask how this life should be? And there's just something so tender about life itself. And we'll have our measure of suffering, everyone will. And so the question is, how do we carry it? And how do we care? How do we tend for one another? So moving to equanimity in Pali, upekkha, in Sanskrit, upeksa. It's one of the four sublime attitudes and is considered neither a thought nor an emotion. It's rather a steady, conscious realization of reality's transience. It's a sustained thread of awareness. It's the ground for wisdom and freedom and the protector of compassion and love. There are some very important misunderstandings about equanimity. The misunderstandings are called near enemies. One of the near enemies is indifference. It masquerades as equanimity, doesn't it? Well, who cares about things, you know? But that's just a withdrawal or a kind of unwise detachment, which I used as a young boy because my family was so painful. I became a bit detached from things as a teenager. And it wasn't very healthy. And I wasn't able to feel the fear or the pain very much. I just kind of withdrew from it all. Okay, I'm above it all. And it all came out later, sorry to say. But indifference is not equanimity. It's actually based on fear and shutting down. And withdrawal is not based on equanimity. It's based on a shell or a separation. True equanimity is the capacity to be spacious and loving and peaceful as all things arise and pass. People are afraid that if they become peaceful, they become passive, or that in equanimity they will lose control, or they're unfamiliar with this weird state. So they're sitting there, you know, not much is going on in my meditation. And, you know, I might be talking to them as an instructor. Maybe close your eyes, sense what's going on. And they say, oh, I can't tell what it is I feel. Okay, but not much is going on. Oh, what's this weird thing? Ah, contentment. Gosh, I've never named that before. And that's not what our culture sells. Now, equanimity has a different dimension to it, different dimensions, plural. It has a vastness to it or space. The traditional image when you put salt in a cup of water and drink it, the water is really salty, but the same spoon of salt in a pond, and the pond is clear and refreshing. You make the mind spacious and vast. And there's a timelessness to it as well. Equanimity releases us from the bondage of time. Aldous Huxley says, an idolatrous religion is one in which time is substituted for eternity. The idea of endless progress is the devil's work, demanding human sacrifice on an enormous scale, where we're always looking to the future and we don't have a sense of that we've already resting in the timeless eternal. There's only this moment. This is it. And it's not out there, it's here. We can make progress. We can do beautiful things, but we can do them from a place of peace in ourselves, of appreciation of the forests and the trees and the children and one another and the care for this human realm. Equanimity has ease in it. The Taoists call it easy come, easy go. So some children were playing beside a river. They made castles of sand as we would when we were kids. And each child defended his castle and said, "This one's mine." And they kept their castles separate. You may have noticed this. Wouldn't allow any mistakes about whose was whose. And when the castles were finished, sometimes they had battles, and one child kicked over another, and the other owner of the castle flew into anger. He spoiled my castle. And they got into conflict, as one would if you were coming from castles in conflict. And then naturally, parents called, it's getting dark, the tide's coming in, whatever. It was evening, and they all thought they had to go home. And no one cared what happened to their castles anymore. One child stomped on his on the way out, and the other pushed it over with his hands. And then they turned away, and each went back to their home. A little description of some part of our human world here. But instead of experiencing conflict, it's possible to disentangle, to rest in ease, to find a way to say things are created and they disappear. Companies, adventures, whole civilizations. Think about it. Remember Y2K? The year 2000? It was a big deal. Where is it now? It's back with the pyramids and the dinosaurs and the early Homo sapien riding those. Joke. Everything appears and vanishes. Your childhood, where is it? It impacted you. We know that. But it's actually gone in most cases, right? Or mostly. And with equanimity, you start to see, sometimes it's called with the eyes of a sage, with naive eyes. You rest and you see, isn't this an amazing dance? And there's such a great depth to it. Now, loving kindness. In Pali, metta means benevolence, friendliness, amity, goodwill, and active interest in others, all the above. Here's a story from Richard Selzer, who's a surgeon at Yale University. It's called The Kiss. So the surgeon says, I stand by the bed where a young woman lies. Her face is post-operative. Her mouth is twisted and palsy, clownish. A tiny twig of the facial nerve, the one to the muscles of her mouth, has been severed. She will be thus from now on. This surgeon had followed with religious fervor the curve of her flesh. I promise you that. Nevertheless, to remove the tumor in her cheek, I had to cut the little nerve. Her young husband is in the room. He stands on the opposite side of the bed, and together they dwell in the evening lamplight. Who are they? I ask. They gaze at each other and touch one another so generously. The woman speaks. Will my mouth always be like this? She asks. Yes, I say, it will. It's because the nerve was cut. She nods a silent nod. But the young man smiles. I like it, he says. It's kind of cute. And at once, I know who he is. And unaware of my presence, I lower my gaze. For one is not bold in an encounter with the gods. And he bends to kiss her crooked mouth. And I so close that I can see how he twists his own lips to accommodate to hers, to show her that their kiss still works. And I remember that the gods appeared in ancient Greece as mortals. And I hold my breath and let the wonder in. There's something about the loving heart that can take the measure of tears and sorrows that make up our human life and the beauty that makes our human life and meet it in a way that's very different than any other way we would approach it. Loving kindness is a practice. And so it says in the teachings, just as water drops on a stone and gradually wears it away, or just as raindrops accumulate in a water jar, so too, drop by drop, the practice of love begins to bring the heart to flower. So, as a practice, loving kindness, meditation, or metta is something that we can train and do. And if you've practiced it, you know at times it can feel mechanical. And at times it can bring up its opposite. It's not easy. Sometimes it seems just so repetitive, mechanical, maybe dry or numb, not much happening. And it seems impossible sometimes, especially when grief is present or self judgment, shame, the feel of imperfection or fear, or like most early mindfulness work and life, expectations. But the practice itself is to include it all, whatever arises, that too. We get to note this is dry, this is numb, this is grief. These are expectations. May I love this as well. What we're really doing is planting seeds. There's a story of a rabbi who used to teach, he said, in the Jewish mystical tradition, that his disciples had to memorize, reflect, and contemplate and place the teachings of the holy words on their heart. One day, a student asked why the rabbi always used the phrase, on your heart. And the master replied, only the divine can put the teachings into your heart. Here, we recite and learn and put them on the heart, hoping that sometime when your heart breaks, they will fall in. So let's take 5 minutes for self-care, an invitation to stand and stretch, walk and grab a fresh beverage, whatever. I'll keep the camera rolling. I'll keep the microphone open, and I'll ring the bell to bring us back. So I'll introduce practices for compassion, equanimity, and loving kindness, somewhat more quickly than the meditations should be, and one after another. That's not the usual practice, just to give you a sense of how you might configure your practice. There are infinite varieties, but this is sort of the standard for beginners and those with beginner's mind like myself. So, to cultivate compassion, you let yourself sit in a centered and quiet way. In this traditional form of practice, you'll combine a repeated inner intention with visualization and the evocation of the feeling of compassion. As you first sit, breathe softly and feel your body, your heartbeat, the life within you. Feel how you treasure your own life, how you guard yourself in the face of your sorrows. After some time, bring to mind someone close to you whom you dearly love. Picture them and feel your natural caring for them. Notice how you hold them in your heart. Then let yourself be aware of their measure of sorrows, their suffering in life. Feel how your heart opens to them and wish them well, to extend comfort, to share in their pain and meet it with compassion. This is the natural response of the heart. So you would inwardly recite these phrases. May you be held in compassion. May your pain and sorrow be eased. May your heart be at peace. Continue reciting all the while you're holding them in your heart. You can modify these phrases any way that makes them true to your heart's intention. After a few minutes, imagine that they turn their compassionate gaze back to you and acknowledge the measure of sorrows you carry. They say to you with tenderness in the same phrases, may you be held in compassion. May your pain and sorrow be eased. May you be at peace. Take these compassionate wishes and let them touch your heart. After a time receiving their care, direct the same compassion to yourself. May I be held in compassion. May my pain and sorrow be eased. May I be at peace. Following this, begin to extend compassion to others that you know. Picture loved ones one after another. Hold the image of each in your heart. Be aware of their difficulties and wish them well with the same phrases. Then you can open your compassion further, a step at a time, to the suffering of your friends, your neighbors, your community, to all who suffer, and then to difficult people, to your enemies if you have them, and finally to the brotherhood and sisterhood of all beings. Sense your tender-hearted connection with all life and its creatures. So work with compassion intuitively. At times it may feel difficult, as though we might be overwhelmed by the pain. Remember, we're not trying to fix the pain of the world, only to meet it with a compassionate heart. Relax and be gentle. Breathe. Let your breath and heart rest naturally as a center of compassion in the midst of the world. To cultivate equanimity, sit in a comfortable posture with your eyes closed. Bring a soft attention to your breath until your body and mind are calm. Then begin by reflecting on the benefit of a mind that has balance and equanimity. Sense what a gift it can be to bring a peaceful heart to the world around you. Let yourself feel an inner sense of balance and ease. Then begin repeating such phrases as, may I be balanced and at peace. Acknowledge that all created things arise and pass away. Joys, sorrows, pleasant events, people, buildings, animals, nations, even whole civilizations. Let yourself rest in the midst of all of them. Add the phrases, may I learn to see the arising and passing of all nature with equanimity and balance. May I be open and balanced and peaceful. Acknowledge that all beings are heirs to their own actions and that their lives arise and pass away according to conditions and deeds created by them. When we can love and care for others, while we can love and care for others, we cannot fix them nor love for them. To find equanimity with others, add the phrase, your happiness and suffering depend on your thoughts and actions, not my wishes for you. In the next step, you can wish peace and equanimity for specific people you know, and then to those beyond, individually or in a group. Wishing, may you learn to see the arising and passing of all things with equanimity and balance. May you have true equanimity. May you be balanced and peaceful. May you live with a peaceful heart. Finally, you can expand your field of equanimity to the whole world. May I bring compassion and equanimity to the events of the world. May I find balance, equanimity, and peace amidst it all. May I learn to see the arising and passing of all things with equanimity and balance. May I be open and balanced and peaceful. May I live with a peaceful heart. Walt Whitman wrote, I am larger than I thought. I did not know I held so much goodness. Begin the practice of loving kindness meditation simply. Adjust so that you can feel comfortable. Let your body rest and your heart be soft. So it's best to begin by directing loving kindness to those you love rather than yourself. Because honestly, often people can find it difficult to direct love to themselves without warming up a little bit. So picture, imagine, think of someone you love a lot where love comes easily and it's uncomplicated. Start where it's easy to first open the heart. You can even begin with a child or a pet. So breathe gently and recite inwardly the following traditional phrases directed toward their well-being. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be safe from inner and outer dangers. May you be well in body and mind. May you be at ease and happy. As you repeat these phrases, hold of this loved one in loving kindness. Adjust the words and images to best open your heart. Repeat these phrases and kind intentions over and over again, letting the feelings permeate your body and mind. Now, this meditation likewise may at times feel mechanical or awkward. It can also bring up feelings of irritation or anger. If this happens, it's especially important to be patient and kind toward yourself, allowing whatever arises to be held in the spirit of friendliness and kind affection. Then after a few minutes, picture a second person about whom love comes easily and extend the same wishes of loving kindness to them. Whether the image or feelings are clear or not, it doesn't matter. Simply continue to plant the seeds of loving wishes, repeating the phrases gently, no matter what arises. The rule in loving kindness practice is to follow the way that most easily opens your heart. Now, after a time, if you're ready to turn loving kindness for yourself, envision or imagine those two loved ones gazing back at you with the same well-wishing. They want you too to be held in kindness, to be safe and well, to be happy. Picture them saying this to you kindly. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be safe from inner and outer dangers. May you be well in body and mind. May you be at ease and happy. Receive these gratefully. After a few repetitions, take their good wishes into yourself. You may even wish to place a hand on your heart and recite, may I be filled with loving kindness. May I be safe from inner and outer dangers. May I be at ease and happy. May I be well in body and mind. And when you've established a sense of loving kindness for yourself, you can expand your meditation to include others. So you can choose a benefactor, someone in your life who's loved or cared for you, and picture this person and carefully recite the same phrases. When loving kindness for your benefactor has developed, you can gradually include other people that you care about in your meditation. Picture each beloved person, recite the same phrases, evoking a sense of loving kindness for each person in turn. And after this, you can include a wider circle of friends. Then gradually extend your meditation, step by step, to picture and include community members, neighbors, people everywhere, animals, all beings, the whole earth. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be safe from inner and outer dangers. May you be well in body and mind. May you be at ease and happy. From Martin Luther King Jr., where he says, "Never succumb to the temptation of becoming bitter. As you press for justice, be sure to move with dignity and discipline, using only the power and the weapons of love." Amazing he uses that word, the weapons of love. And he would dare to do that. But he was in a battle in some way. And the battle was really the battle of shifting from the separation, this separation that's so untrue and the cause of so much sorrow, to opening the minds and hearts of the world, to use only the power of love. So you sense that possibility. So in closing, let's dedicate all the value accrued through prayer, contemplation, meditation, and practice for the benefit of all beings and to the incomparable expanse of totality. Thank you for joining me. I love you. We'll see you soon.